Oh my God, if you are a drone pilot in the US and you didn't see this yesterday, congratulations for finding this video. We're going to show you this excerpt now out of the Senate. They tried to pass an emergency drone bill that would enable local and state authorities to have more surveillance options. The Democrats were fully supporting this, and Republican Senator Rand Paul out of Kentucky denied this bill and protected all of our privacy rights as drone pilots in the United States. So let's go ahead and break into Chuck Schumer first, and then we're going to go to another Democrat senator with his support for the bill. And finally, about the halfway point, we're going to break into Rand Paul's speech in opposition to this emergency drone bill for more surveillance on Americans. But let's go ahead and jump into it now.
Majority Leader.
In a few moments, my friend Senator Peters will offer an amendment that responds to the reports of unusual drone activity, and I thank him for his great work and leadership on this. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of this bipartisan drone legislation, which the FBI, the DHS, the FAA, and the DoD, the Department of Defense, all support. The Senate should pass our bill without delay. Our bill, among other things, explicitly authorizes state and local authorities to conduct drone detection and helps them better coordinate with federal law enforcement agencies to keep communities safe. The people in New York and New Jersey have a lot of questions, and they're not getting good enough answers. The utter confusion surrounding these drone sightings shows that the feds can't respond all on their own. They need help detecting these drones from local officials who have neither the resources nor the explicit authority to act, and the bill fixes that. We all know drones are a relatively new phenomena, and there are millions of them all over the United States. A lot of them are hobbyists, some of them are companies doing legitimate work. But the federal government just doesn't have the ability or resources. If we were to say the federal government should look at this completely, they'd be taken away from so many other important jobs. So the most logical thing to do is say, let the localities have some authority. These are law enforcement authorities. These are people we know and we trust. Now, for all we know, the recent drone incidents are entirely benign. But the people of New York and New Jersey understandably still have questions, and they deserve answers. The problem is the widespread use of drones is relatively new in the eyes of federal law, and therefore the authority to detect drone activity near sensitive infrastructure is totally in federal jurisdiction. And that should be fixed in an appropriate way. The federal government just doesn't have the ability to go in every corner of America and see whether the drones are safe or not safe. Local law enforcement is appropriate, and they will work with the feds in working on this. The bill is about giving local officials on the ground greater flexibility and proven technology to detect and track threats in their jurisdictions. It's about giving people answers they don't now have, heard directly from authorities on the ground. If this bill becomes law, we will have better clarity in the future. So I yield to my friend from Michigan, who's worked hard on this issue for a long period of time. It has broad bipartisan support. I hope the Senate can act. I yield.
Madam President.
Senator from Michigan.
Madam President, every day, more and more Americans are using drones, from everything from hobby flights to commercial applications, as well as law enforcement activities. Drones can offer important societal and economic benefits, but they can also cause problems if they are not used appropriately. Recently in New Jersey, we've seen reports of loud and menacing drones. And while the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and other key agencies have assured the public that these drones pose no immediate Homeland Security threat, they have certainly caused unease and concern for many Americans. Rogue drones can interfere with commercial air traffic, as we saw with the recent closure of runways at a New York airport, as well as large public gatherings like football games or concerts. The National Football League, a key supporter of this legislation, has shared that at recent seasons, they have seen more than 2,500 drones violate the airspace around stadiums, and in some cases leading to them stopping the football games to resolve potential threats to their fans as well as to their teams. We've also seen how drones operate by a bad actor can quickly become a very serious security threat. This summer, an assailant used a drone to surveil President-elect Trump's rally site in Butler, Pennsylvania, just hours before firing shots in a horrific assassination attempt. And that's why I've been working to pass bipartisan legislation that would address these concerns by giving law enforcement the tools and the authorities that they need to detect, to identify, and track drones to ensure that they do not pose any risk to Americans. My legislation, which passed out of the committee that I chair, Homeland Security and Government Affairs, passed unanimously last Congress, would equip law enforcement agencies, including state and local police, like the officials currently dealing with the ongoing situation in New Jersey, with the tools to better detect and to track drones and identify cases where they may pose a security threat to large public gatherings, airports, critical infrastructure facilities, as well as our communities. Most urgently, this bill would ensure that law enforcement has the technology needed to quickly and clearly identify exactly what the reported sightings of drones across the country actually are. If a drone is found to be a potential danger, our law enforcement agencies, they must have the tools to mitigate these threats effectively. And that's why my bill would allow the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice to operate a pilot program so that state and local law enforcement agencies can conduct drone mitigation activities to safely disable threatening drones before they cause serious harm. This legislation has strong bipartisan support here in the U.S. Senate. We currently have 28 co-sponsors from both sides of the aisles, 14 Democrats, 11 Republicans, and 3 independents. And as the number of registered drones continue to grow, so does the need to pass this critical legislation to ensure that our law enforcement agencies can address these potential threats. So I urge my colleagues to join me in passing this common sense bill to safeguard our homeland and ensure that law enforcement can better protect our communities from the potential threats posed by recklessly or nefariously operated drones. So I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs be discharged from further consideration of S. 1631, and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration, that the Peters substitute amendment, which is at the desk, be considered and agreed to, and the bill as amended be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there an objection?
Madam President,
Senator from Kentucky.
reserving the right to object. No one disputes that drones flying in airspace could be a danger, that drones flying over the Super Bowl could be a danger, that drones flying over our military bases could be a danger. That's why it's illegal. It's currently illegal, and the federal government has the capacity to investigate and stop drones that are in airspace, over our military bases, following our ships. We have that capacity. But what is disputed, and what the Biden administration is currently telling us, is they don't see a problem. So if there is a problem, let the Biden administration be forthcoming. Let us know the extent of the problem. Let us know who's flying the drones, and let us know what's going on. Instead, this bill says, well, we don't know. The Biden administration doesn't know, but why don't we give the power to the local officials to go after drones? But I rise today to object to this unanimous consent request because at the time, public trust in government is in historic lows. This body must not rush to grant sweeping surveillance powers without proper consideration and debate by the committees of jurisdiction, which is what I pledge to do beginning in January when we will be in charge of the committees. Yet what is going on is exactly what this legislation seeks to do now, is to expand federal authority to intercept communications and disrupt drone activity, powers that raise serious concerns for Americans' privacy, civil liberties, and Fourth Amendment protections against unwarranted search and seizure. We are being told this legislation is urgent, that it is needed to address an imminent drone threat. Yet the government itself admits no such threat exists. So either there is a threat or there isn't a threat, but the Biden administration keeps saying, well, it's all normal stuff and it's just planes. So it is or it isn't. Why don't we try to get to the truth of the matter of what actually exists and what the threat is before we propose legislation? Federal agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, have stated clearly that there is no current national security risk, no public safety concern, and no unlawful drone activity requiring intervention. So there either is a problem or there isn't a problem. If there is a problem, let's discuss how to do it while protecting the communications of innocent Americans whose communications could be caught up in this legislation. Until the assessment, the federal assessment changes. The assessment that it isn't a problem changes to that it is a problem, and these are the malefactors. These are the people that are orchestrating this. Let's get that from the Biden administration. Tell us what the problem is. Tell us the extent of the problem. Instead, the Biden administration is saying there's not a problem. So, Madam President, this pattern is all too familiar. History has shown us time and time again how fear and manufactured urgency are used as pretext to expand government power at the expense of freedom. After 9/11, Congress passed the Patriot Act. In the name of security, Americans were promised that these surveillance powers were necessary. They would only be directed towards foreigners. They would only be directed towards terrorists until we discovered that these powers were being used on Americans. Americans were promised that these powers were necessary and temporary. Instead, they were abused, misused, and weaponized. Innocent Americans had their privacy violated, their data collected, and their rights trampled. The lesson here is clear. When Congress legislates in haste, without careful scrutiny, without debate, and without accountability, it is the American people who suffer the consequences. Today, we are facing a similar moment. The bill before us would grant law enforcement significant authority to intercept private electronic communications without consent. For example, the bill would allow the government to conduct dragnet surveillance of the phones innocent Americans traveling through U.S. airports as long as the government claims they are doing it to neutralize a drone. So in order to look at the information that might be coming to a drone, it may be that you capture all the information of everybody surrounding an airport or everybody who lives near an airport. Once you have all that data, what are the assurances that the government isn't looking at your data in addition to the data that may be related to flying the drone? This is not just about security, it's about unchecked government overreach. It's about capitalizing on fear and media-driven hysteria to jam through sweeping legislation that could violate the civil liberties of American people. Congress has a constitutional responsibility to serve as a check on the executive power, not as a rubber stamp for it. The federal government already has the power to deal with drones. The federal government already has the power to stop any drones that are in airspace around airports. The federal government already has the power to protect its air bases. So if there is a significant problem here, the Biden administration needs to come forward and let us know who are these drones, who's operating these drones, what is the federal government doing to protect either airports or bases from this. Instead, we are told by the Biden administration there is no threat to our national security. So let's first insist on truth and transparency from the Biden administration before offering up legislation that is feel good, pat somebody on the back and say, oh, we've done something about drones. We are strong on drones. Congress has a constitutional responsibility to serve as a check on executive power, not as a rubber stamp. We owe it to the American people to demand compelling justification, meaningful safeguards, and full transparency before granting any new surveillance authorities. We are a nation of laws, not fear, not panic, and not manufactured urgency. We do not trade away our freedoms, our privacy, and our constitutional protections for vague promises of security. I will object to this bill today, but I am open to talking with the authors of this bill about how we could have enhanced ability to interrupt drone activity, but done while protecting all Americans' constitutional right to privacy. Madam President, I object.
Objection is heard.
So there you have it, guys. That's the full coverage of this emergency drone bill that was supposed to be passed through yesterday. And if it was up to the Democrats, we would have had more surveillance on drone pilots in the United States. Thanks to Rand Paul for standing up and having some clarity about this bill and this knee-jerk reaction. This drone bill was blocked. So if you like this news and you appreciate the channel and the coverage of the mysterious drones happening in New York and New Jersey and the follow-up today with this video, please do like, subscribe, and continue to participate on the channel. Happy flying, everybody. Be safe out there, and I will see you on the next one.